Thank you, everyone, for joining me today. Yes, my name is Micheal Smith. I'm the National Education Manager of Janome Canada, and I'm very proud to say Janome Canada has donated the fabulous 2030 machines that we're all sewing and hopefully loving in the lab. So I was very excited when I Love First Peoples asked me to come out and give a little lesson on the machine. I see you're already doing some fabulous ribbon skirts on the machines, but you know, there's so much we can do with these machines, so I wanted to go over some of the pressure feed and attachments that are included in the machine, so then you can continue to learn and grow and use your machine. I first bought my very first Janome sewing machine 32 years ago and still have it. So that's the great thing about the Janome brand. It'll probably outlast all of us, and we can certainly get the most out of it. Now, that gentleman over there you will see is, yes, my fabulous marketing coordinator, Alan. He has, I'm very thankful, accompanied me on the trip here, so he can do the photos and videos as well, because we're going to be piecing this together and then sharing it with other of the sewing labs that are going to receive these machines. So don't be surprised if Alan says, oh, could you put your heads a little together and say cheese? But if you then don't want to be in the pictures, you can run out of the way. That's okay too. And the fabulous Jenny, does everyone already know you? That you will be, yes, yeah, fabulous. That she will be here coordinating the sewing lab. So then it's ongoing learning beyond just what we're going to be doing here. So you can always get the most out of your machines. So welcome. So yes, I wanted to go over the machines a little bit with you, and we'll demo some of the pressure feet that you may not be familiar with, and little tips and tricks. I see already, again, everybody's been using the machines, which is great. And it's very important, you know, when we're winding our bobbins, always we'll start from the foundation up. So just as a little tip, you know, threading the machine, again, we want to make sure the thread is coming from the bottom of the spool, like so. We can use pretty much any kind of thread we want on the machine. It was wonderful to coordinate the donation drive that people have been donating to I Love First Peoples, again, here to your sewing lab, and they have donated a ton of thread and fabric. And so the nice thing is all that thread, yes, we can use on our Janome machine. We want to make sure to use the correct spool cap, and I'm very pleased to see when we have a big spool of thread like that, we need this big spool cap on it. So that way the thread comes off the spool and it doesn't get wrapped around this spool pin. Included in the machine is this little medium size spool cap, but if we're using this big giant cone, we want to make sure, again, that the spool cap is bigger than the top of the spool of thread. Some of the threads will be really skinny cones, little skinny spools, and then it's okay to use this medium-sized one. It just has to be bigger. The spool cap has to be bigger than the top of the spool of thread as a general rule. So that is very important. Tip number one, because if your machine is jamming and you wonder, why can't I sew? If you don't have the correct spool cap on, it could wrap around the spool pin here. So as we're going to thread the bobbin, we have the little tension disc here, and I often say, floss that thread through so we know it's fully engaged. Sometimes in people's haste, they miss this step, and then the bobbin doesn't wind correctly. You will not get good sewing if you don't have your bobbin wound correctly. Now, as Marcy's probably gone over with you all, if we put the little thread through the center of the bobbin and up to the top, like that, you will get a perfectly wound bobbin every time. I've been doing this for 32 years and it works perfectly every time. Now, very important, your machine came with these Janome J bobbins. There's actually a little J on that center spool, and it does stand for Janome, but also there is a rubberized compound in these bobbins. So they make sewing a little quieter. We can sew at really high speeds and then stop, and then the bobbin's not going to continue to spin. And then if you do drop these on the floor, they won't break as easily if you step on them, which I've done many times. So We snap that firmly on that bobbin spindle, move over the bobbin to the little stopper, and then we'll see on our LCD screen here, it's telling us to put our foot on the gas, and then we hold up this string. As we're winding, once we get it wound a little bit, you can stop and then cut this off. You don't have to hold it the whole time. If it's a cotton thread that you're using, it'll probably just break off on its own. If it's a polyester thread, it may start twisting back down towards the bobbin, so it's okay. You can stop and cut it off, and then I always have this terrible habit of just throwing that over my shoulder. Eventually I'll clean it up, but I'm too busy. I can't throw it in the garbage. So as we get going and sewing, you'll see when that thread is firmly engaged in that tension, the bobbin is going to wind evenly. The thread's going to go up and down across that whole bobbin. So it's going to be nice and even. And the great thing is, maybe we don't need this whole bobbin of red thread in this instance. We can stop at any time. We don't have to always wind a full bobbin. But eventually, as we wind it totally full, it's going to stop all on its own. And then you know the bobbin is fully wound, and then away you go. Nothing is worse as you're sewing and then you run out of bobbin thread. But again, maybe you're using a strange color, so you don't necessarily need that whole bobbin. So there, it's going to stop all on its own. Cut my thread. Beautifully wound bobbin. And you can double check that it's nice and firm. You take a little tool, a seam ripper, a screwdriver, and press it on your bobbin. If your tool sinks into that thread, then the bobbin is not wound correctly. It should be firm, so my tool isn't going to disappear into that bobbin. So then we know it's nice and firm, it's good to go. Open our little bobbin cover, and we're going to form, it's a P. I would say P for perfect stitches with Janome. So when we're looking at the bobbin, the thread comes counterclockwise off to the left. So it forms the letter P when we're staring at it. So yes, think of P for perfect stitches. So there we just lay our thread in under the little tension guide. Now the great thing is there's full instructions in your manual. So it's always good to refer back to, but once you do this a couple of times, I'm sure you're all pros at this already. So now, yes, we're ready to thread the machine, and very importantly, we take off a bunch of thread, enough to get down to the needle. And I do that because I'm going to stop that thread. I'm going to catch it right here with my finger, and I want, this two-handed threading. So that way we stop the thread coming off the spool, because we want a little bit of tension on it as we go through the numbered guides. Very importantly, when we get up here to this take-up lever, is that little shiny silver, a lot of people call it